Gary and Vanessa Parker had always dreamed of a better life. For years, they had worked long hours at their jobs, scraping by, never able to afford the things they truly wanted. Their small apartment in the city was cramped, and their hopes seemed as small as their bank account. But one evening, everything changed. Gary had bought a lottery ticket on a whim. He wasn't the type to gamble often, but he thought, what if this is the one time we get lucky? After a long day at work, he came home and sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water. Vanessa was in the living room watching TV. The noise of the game show barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Gary scratched the ticket and stared at it in disbelief. The numbers matched. All of them. Vanessa's voice called out from the other room. Did you win something? Gary didn't answer right away. His heart raced. He looked at the ticket again. $79,900. His mind spun. It was more money than they had ever had. It was more than a dream come true. He stood up and walked slowly into the living room, holding the ticket in his hand. Gary, what's wrong? Vanessa asked, noticing his face pale. I think I just won the lottery. She stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. What do you mean? How much did you win? Gary handed her the ticket, his hands trembling. Vanessa's eyes scanned the numbers, her expression unreadable at first. Then, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Oh my God, this is real. We're rich. We can finally leave this place behind. Gary smiled, but something in Vanessa's eyes made him pause. She was already imagining the life they could have with the money. She was already picturing the things they could buy, the house, the car, the vacations. But Gary wasn't as excited as he expected to be. His thoughts raced, and a cold, uncomfortable feeling settled in his stomach. Vanessa reached over, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "We're going to change everything. This is just the beginning. I'm going to start planning everything right now." Gary nodded, trying to force a smile, but the feeling didn't go away. Over the next few days, things began to change. Vanessa became obsessed with the idea of their new life. She started making lists of things they needed, things they could afford now. She started researching houses in the suburbs, expensive cars, and luxury vacations. The excitement in her voice never faded. But Gary wasn't so sure. He kept thinking about the people who had won the lottery and lost it all. He thought about how their lives would change. He was scared. Vanessa's behavior grew more intense. Late at night, when Gary couldn't sleep, he would hear her pacing the living room. He overheard her on the phone with a lawyer, asking questions about taxes, about protecting the money. He didn't understand why she was so focused on the details so soon. It wasn't even a week since they'd won, and she was already acting like she had everything planned. Gary tried to talk to her, to slow things down, but she wouldn't hear it. Why are you acting like this? We have a future now. We don't have to worry anymore. Let's enjoy it, Vanessa would say. But Gary's gut told him that something wasn't right. It wasn't long before the tension between them started to grow. Vanessa's obsession with the money consumed her, and Gary couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. As the days passed, Gary began to realize that the life they were building wasn't just about the money. There was something deeper, something darker about Vanessa's desire for it. And that scared him more than anything. Gary couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Vanessa's behavior had become more erratic since the lottery win. She was constantly talking about the money, about what they would buy, and how everything would change. But it wasn't just the excitement anymore. There was a sharpness in her tone, a possessiveness that Gary hadn't noticed before. They sat at the dinner table one evening, the usual chatter absent as they ate in silence. Vanessa was hunched over her plate, her eyes glued to her phone. Gary could tell she wasn't really paying attention to the meal. Instead, she was scrolling through the latest listings for a new house, her face illuminated by the bright screen. "Vanessa, can we talk for a minute?" Gary asked, his voice hesitant. She barely looked up from her phone. "About what?" "I don't know, everything. The money, the house, all of it. I just feel like we're rushing. I think we need to slow down." Vanessa finally glanced at him, her eyes narrowing. "Slow down? Why? We've got this chance now. Do you want to stay stuck in that tiny apartment forever? I want better for us. I'm not going to wait around, Gary. This is our future." Gary felt a knot tighten in his chest. He'd never seen her like this before, so determined, so single-minded. The usual warm and loving Vanessa was being replaced by someone else. Someone who was only interested in one thing, the money. "I don't want to lose sight of who we are, Vanessa," he said quietly. "We've got to remember why we started this journey. It wasn't just about the money. Vanessa scoffed, tossing her phone onto the table. Oh, please, Gary. Don't act like you don't want all of this too. This money is ours. We deserve it. I deserve it. Her words stung. Gary opened his mouth to respond, but paused, unsure of what to say. What had happened to the woman he married? Where was the woman who wanted to build a life together? Who cared about the little things in their relationship? As the days went on, the tension only deepened. Vanessa's obsession with the money intensified. She started spending more time with a lawyer, asking him questions about how they could protect their new fortune. She even suggested setting up a separate bank account, just for her, a just-in-case fund. Gary didn't like any of it. He tried to voice his concerns again, but Vanessa became angry and defensive. Why do you keep questioning everything? You're acting like I'm trying to steal from you. I'm just trying to make sure we don't lose everything. You don't get it, do you? This is our only shot at a better life. Gary stared at her, unsure of how to respond. He thought back to their early days together, when they had dreams of a simple, happy life. But now, all their conversations seemed to revolve around money, security, and the future, things he couldn't quite wrap his head around. What happened to the love they had? What happened to the trust? That night, Gary couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the apartment. He had always trusted Vanessa, but now, doubt began to creep in. He couldn't ignore it anymore, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He thought back to the early days of their marriage, when everything felt easier. There were no secrets, no agendas. But now, all he could think about was the money, and how it seemed to change everything. Vanessa had always wanted more, but now, it felt like she wanted it all, everything, and everyone in her way be damned. The following evening, after another long day of discussions about future plans, Vanessa made dinner for the two of them. It was the first time in days that she seemed to slow down. But when Gary sat at the table, he noticed something was different. The smile on Vanessa's face seemed a little too forced, her eyes a little too bright. Dinner's ready, she said sweetly, but Gary felt a chill in the air. She served him a plate of pasta, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the food in front of him. He noticed that her usual cheerful demeanor had faded, replaced by something colder, more calculated. As he took a bite, his stomach churned. The pasta didn't taste right. Something about it was off. He pushed the plate aside, feeling the unease grow. What's wrong? Vanessa asked, her voice sweet, but her eyes never left his face. Gary stared at her, trying to calm his racing heart. I'm not feeling well. I think I'll go to bed early tonight. Vanessa didn't protest. Instead, she smiled, her lips curling in a way that made Gary feel even more uncomfortable. Okay, darling. Rest up. We've got big plans tomorrow. As Gary walked toward the bedroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that the plans she had in mind were far darker than he could imagine. The next morning, Gary woke up with a headache. It wasn't the kind of headache that came from too much drinking or lack of sleep. It was deeper, like a feeling in the back of his mind that something had gone horribly wrong. The unease from the night before lingered, and despite the soft, warm sunlight filtering through the curtains, Gary couldn't shake the sense that Vanessa was hiding something from him. He got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, where he found Vanessa humming to herself, already preparing breakfast. There was something about her that seemed almost too calm. The way she moved, the way her smile never wavered. It was all too perfect, too controlled. Gary watched her for a moment, wondering if he was just being paranoid. Morning, sleepyhead, Vanessa said brightly as she set a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. I made your favorite. Gary forced a smile, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He sat down at the table and stared at the food in front of him. But his appetite was nowhere to be found. The eggs looked normal, but his stomach was tight with worry. He didn't want to seem rude, so he picked up his fork and took a bite. For a moment, everything seemed fine. The eggs were soft and warm, just the way he liked them. But then, as he chewed, a bitter taste spread across his mouth. It wasn't enough to make him spit it out, but it was enough to make him pause. The flavor was sharp, unpleasant, like chemicals. Gary's eyes widened as he set the fork down. Vanessa, what's in these eggs? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She looked up from the counter, her face beaming. Just a little extra seasoning. You like them spicy, right? Gary tried to ignore the rising panic in his chest. I don't know. Something tastes weird. Are you sure you didn't? Vanessa's expression instantly changed, her smile vanishing. Don't be dramatic, Gary. They're fine. I just wanted to make something special for you today. Gary's hand trembled as he reached for his glass of water and washed the taste away. But the unease continued to gnaw at him. He had heard of people getting sick from food poisoning before. But this felt different, too calculated, too intentional. He tried to push his concerns aside. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just overthinking it. After all, Vanessa had been so kind lately, always trying to do nice things for him. Still, the nagging feeling lingered. After breakfast, Gary felt even worse. His head was pounding, his stomach turning in knots. He stumbled to the couch, hoping the nausea would pass. Vanessa followed him, sitting beside him and placing a hand on his forehead. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You look pale." "I think I'm just not feeling well," Gary murmured, his eyelids heavy. He was having trouble staying awake now. The combination of the headache, dizziness, and nausea was overwhelming. "Maybe I'll just lie down for a while." Vanessa nodded, still acting sweet and concerned. "You get some rest, Gary. I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about a thing." Gary closed his eyes and drifted in and out of sleep. His body heavy, his mind foggy. As he dozed, a new thought began to take shape. He remembered the way Vanessa had acted the night before, too calm, too focused on the future. She hadn't seemed worried about his discomfort at all. In fact, she had seemed almost pleased. The thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. Could she have done this on purpose? He tried to sit up, but his head spun, and the room tilted. The pounding in his skull grew louder, and his stomach twisted in agony. His breath became shallow, his chest tight. "Vanessa," he croaked. "Something's wrong. With the food." But his words slurred, and the room spun faster. He reached out for something to steady himself, but his hand fell short. He felt his vision darken at the edges. And before he could call out again, the world around him went black. Vanessa watched him closely from the doorway, her eyes cold and calculating as Gary's body slumped on the couch. She had done it. The poison had worked. She had planned this carefully, taking the money, taking control of their future. It wasn't just about the lottery. It was about power, about having everything she had always wanted. She took a deep breath and walked over to him, kneeling beside the couch. She placed a hand on his chest, feeling for his heartbeat. It was slow, irregular, but he was still alive, barely. She smiled to herself. There was no turning back now. He was never going to wake up. Vanessa stood up, her heart racing with excitement. The money would be hers. She would go to the bank, claim the ticket, and start the life she had always dreamed of. She would tell everyone that Gary had simply passed in his sleep, that he'd gotten sick, and that was the end of it. No one would suspect a thing. But then, a thought crossed her mind. What if he woke up? What if he found out what she had done? The fear crept in, but she quickly shoved it aside. She had been careful. There was no way he could wake up now. Vanessa walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. Everything was within her reach now. The house, the car, the vacations, everything she had always dreamed of. And Gary? He was nothing more than a memory. Gary's eyes fluttered open, but his head was pounding like a drum, and his body felt as though it had been crushed under a weight. For a moment, he wasn't sure where he was. The light from the windows was harsh, stabbing his senses. He squinted, trying to focus, but everything seemed blurry. His throat was dry, and his mouth tasted bitter, like he hadn't drunk anything in days. He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness hit him, and he collapsed back onto the couch. The room spun around him as he fought to catch his breath. Something wasn't right. "Vanessa?" He croaked, his voice weak and shaky. He tried to call out again, but his throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. A soft click echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her face the picture of calm. Her eyes were soft, but there was something in her expression that Gary couldn't quite place. Something cold, something distant. "Gary, you're awake," she said, her voice sweet and full of concern. "I've been so worried about you. How do you feel?" Gary tried to focus on her, but his mind was foggy. He remembered the dinner, the eggs, the sharp taste. He remembered the nausea, the dizziness, and then blackness. "What happened? What did you give me?" Gary asked, his voice raspy as he tried to push himself upright. Vanessa knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "It's okay, Gary. You just had a little food poisoning. I'm sure it'll pass soon. I thought you needed to rest, so I let you sleep." Gary frowned, struggling to process her words. "Food poisoning? No, it didn't feel like that." He felt more than just sick. He felt as if his very life force had been drained from him. He looked up at Vanessa, trying to see past her perfect mask of concern. Something in her eyes made his stomach churn. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't remember anything. I just remember feeling like I was dying." Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "It's just the after effects of the food, sweetie. Nothing to worry about. You'll feel better soon." Gary's head swam, but he knew he had to get out of there. His instincts were screaming at him to move, to run. Something wasn't right. Vanessa was acting too calm, too perfect. This wasn't a simple case of food poisoning. He had to get to the truth. He pushed himself to stand, his legs shaking beneath him. Vanessa was beside him instantly, her hand on his arm, steadying him. "I think I need some fresh air," Gary said, trying to force the words past his dry lips. "Gary, maybe you should rest just a little longer," Vanessa said softly, her hand tightening around his arm. "You've been through a lot." Gary shook his head, his vision still blurry but his gut telling him to get away. "No, I'm fine. I need to go outside." With every step he took toward the door, he could feel Vanessa's gaze on him. Her eyes were watching him too closely, her hands hovering just a bit too near. It was as if she were waiting for something, waiting for him to collapse, waiting for him to give up. It unsettled him even more. As Gary reached the door, he turned to look at Vanessa one last time. Her smile remained, but there was a hardness to it now. The mask was cracking. "I'll be back soon," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Vanessa didn't say anything. She just nodded, her fingers tightening around the doorframe. "Take care of yourself, Gary." Gary stepped out into the hallway, his legs barely holding him upright. The world seemed too loud, too bright. His head was still pounding, and his body felt like lead. But he had to find answers. He had to know what had happened. The apartment building's stairwell felt like a labyrinth. As Gary made his way down to the lobby, his thoughts were muddled. But he couldn't ignore the gut-wrenching sense that he had narrowly escaped something much darker than food poisoning. Something wasn't adding up. He pushed open the front door and stepped out into the cool air, letting it wash over him. The fresh breeze helped clear his mind, but the unease never left him. He needed to think, to piece together everything that had happened in the past few days. There had to be a reason for the way Vanessa was acting. There had to be something more to it than what she was telling him. As he stood there, trying to gather his thoughts, Gary realized something terrifying. He had never felt so alone. And the worst part? He couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa had been planning this all along. Gary's feet felt heavy as he walked along the sidewalk, his head still spinning with questions. The fresh air had helped clear some of the fog. But the more he thought, the more the pieces didn't fit. Why had Vanessa acted so strangely after the lottery win? Why had she been so intent on getting everything ready so quickly? Why had she seemed to push him away whenever he questioned her plans? His thoughts kept circling back to the night he fell ill. The bitter taste in the eggs. The dizziness that hit him so suddenly. The way his body had just shut down. It wasn't normal. And it wasn't food poisoning. Gary needed answers, and he knew that they wouldn't come from talking to Vanessa. He had to do something that made his stomach churn just thinking about it. He had to dig into her life, to uncover whatever secrets she might be hiding. He had to know if she had been planning his death from the moment they won the lottery. His first stop was the local pharmacy, where he bought a small bottle of activated charcoal. He didn't know much about poisoning, but he remembered that charcoal could sometimes help absorb toxins from the body. He took the bottle with him as he walked back to his apartment, trying to ignore the growing dread in his chest. As he stepped into the elevator, Gary's mind raced. Could Vanessa really have poisoned him? Could she have killed him over the lottery money? It sounded insane, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed to make sense. She had been acting strangely, almost too excited about the win. She'd started making plans before the ink was even dry on the lottery ticket. And now, the poisoning. The timing was too perfect. The elevator doors opened, and Gary stepped into the hallway, his pulse quickening. When he reached his door, he hesitated, trying to decide what to do next. He didn't want to confront Vanessa yet, not until he had proof. But what kind of proof did he need? What could he find that would expose her for what she was? He took a deep breath and unlocked the door, stepping inside quietly. The apartment was eerily still, as if nothing had changed since he'd left. Vanessa's purse was on the counter, her phone charging on the coffee table. He glanced around, feeling like an intruder in his own home. But there was no sign of her. Gary moved cautiously through the apartment, his mind sharp. He needed to find something, anything, that would explain what had happened. His gaze fell on the kitchen, and he made his way over to the counter, where the remains of their breakfast still sat. The plates were empty, but he noticed something odd, an almost imperceptible residue on the plate that had once held his eggs. It wasn't much, just a faint trace of powder. He rubbed his fingers over the surface and brought them to his nose. The faintest chemical smell lingered. His stomach twisted. With trembling hands, he searched through the kitchen cabinets, his eyes scanning every bottle, every container. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A small bottle of white powder was tucked behind a jar of spices, hidden away in the back. It looked out of place. The label was nearly worn off, but there was one word he could still make out: poison. Gary's heart skipped a beat. The proof he needed was right in front of him. Vanessa had been poisoning him, and if she had done it once, she could do it again. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He quickly put the bottle into his pocket and headed for the bedroom, searching for Vanessa's things. If he was going to confront her, he needed everything, every shred of evidence. As he rummaged through the drawers, he found something that made his blood run cold: a bank statement with Vanessa's name on it, showing large withdrawals and wire transfers. The transfers were listed under the heading Personal Account. The amounts were significant, far more than they had ever discussed. Gary's mind raced. What was she doing with all that money? Was she planning to run? Was that why she had been so eager to get rid of him? The sound of the door opening snapped Gary out of his thoughts. His heart skipped a beat, and he quickly shoved the bank statement back into the drawer, trying to calm his breathing. "Gary," Vanessa's voice called out from the hallway. She sounded surprised, but there was a hint of nervousness in her tone. Gary quickly stood up, trying to act natural, but his heart was pounding. "I just needed some air," he said, his voice a little shaky. I went for a walk." Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her eyes scanning the room before landing on him. Her gaze flicked to the counter, where the poison bottle was now missing. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a tight smile. "You're feeling better, I see," she said coolly. "That's good." Gary forced a smile, his stomach churning as he tried to hold back the anger and fear building inside him. "Yeah, much better." But inside, his mind was racing. He couldn't let her see the fear in his eyes. He couldn't let her know that he knew. "Vanessa," he began, his voice steady but his mind sharp. "We need to talk." Vanessa's expression hardened as she stepped further into the room, closing the door behind her with a quiet click. Gary could feel the tension in the air thickening, like the calm before a storm. She didn't say anything at first, just studied him with those cold, calculating eyes of hers. It was as if she were assessing him, deciding whether or not to reveal the truth. Gary's heart was racing, but he kept his composure. He couldn't let her see the fear in his eyes. "Not now." "Vanessa," he repeated, his voice more forceful this time. "We need to talk." "About what happened?" She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a small, tight smile. "What do you mean, Gary? You were sick. You're fine now, right? It's nothing to worry about." Gary took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had to confront her. He had to expose what she had done, no matter the cost. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's not just that. I know what you did. I know about the poison." Vanessa's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Poison? You're being paranoid, Gary. There was no poison. I told you, it was food poisoning." Gary took a step toward her, his voice steady but filled with an intensity he had never shown before. "Don't lie to me. I found the bottle, Vanessa. I found the poison. I found your bank statements. I know everything." Vanessa stiffened, and for a split second, Gary thought he saw something flash in her eyes. Fear? Regret? But it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by that same cold calculation. She took a slow step back, and her hand moved toward the counter, resting lightly on the edge, as if she were preparing herself for what was to come. "You really think you can outsmart me, Gary?" she asked, her voice suddenly cold, her words dripping with venom. "You think you can just walk out of this and get away with it? You're nothing but a fool." Gary's chest tightened. "I won't let you get away with this. You tried to kill me, all because of the money. The lottery. You wanted it all, didn't you? You couldn't stand the idea of sharing it with me." Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger. She took a step forward, her voice low and dangerous. "You think I killed you for the money? You think this is just about money?" She laughed, a harsh, hollow sound that made the hairs on the back of Gary's neck stand up. No, Gary, it's not just about the money. It's about power, control. It's about having everything I've ever wanted, everything you've held me back from. Gary's mind spun, but he refused to back down. You've changed, Vanessa. Ever since we won the lottery, you've been a different person. Obsessed, manipulative. I never thought I'd say this, but I don't even know who you are anymore. Her expression darkened. She stepped closer, her gaze locked onto his. You never really understood me, Gary. You never saw what I was capable of. But now you do. You're right about one thing, though. I wanted everything, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it. Gary's blood ran cold. The finality in her voice, the coldness in her eyes. It was as if she had already made up her mind. She had crossed a line, and she wasn't going back. You really think you can stop me now? Vanessa continued, her voice colder than ice. You think you can expose me? You think anyone would believe you? You're weak, Gary. You're nothing without me. And I'll make sure you never tell anyone what happened here. Gary's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his distance. He had to be careful. Vanessa was dangerous. He knew that now. She was playing a game, and she had all the pieces in her hands. But he couldn't back down. He couldn't let her win. Vanessa, he said, his voice steady. You can't keep running from this. You've gone too far. People will find out. And when they do, you won't be able to talk your way out of it. For a moment, Vanessa just stared at him, her eyes cold, calculating. Then, without warning, she lunged at him, her hands reaching for his throat. Gary staggered back, surprised by her sudden aggression. His mind screamed at him to fight back, to do something. But his body was still weak from the poison. He stumbled as Vanessa pushed him further, her grip tightening on his neck. The pressure made it hard to breathe, but he couldn't let her get the upper hand. Not now. In a desperate move, Gary managed to twist away from her grip, shoving her back with all the strength he could muster. She staggered but quickly regained her balance, her eyes blazing with fury. Don't think you can escape, Gary, she hissed. You'll never leave me. Not alive. Gary's heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time, he felt a real fear, not just of Vanessa, but of what she was capable of. The woman he had loved was gone, replaced by someone much more dangerous, much more ruthless. She was willing to kill him, not just for money, but to maintain control, to get everything she wanted. Gary took a step back, his mind racing. He had to get out of there. He had to call the police. But Vanessa wasn't going to let him go that easily. He had to be smart. You'll regret this. Vanessa, he said, his voice low, filled with anger and fear. You won't win. Not this time. With one last look at her, Gary turned and bolted for the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what Vanessa would do next, but he knew that he couldn't trust her anymore. He couldn't stay in that apartment, not with her capable of anything. As the door slammed shut behind him, Gary took off into the night, knowing that the fight for his life wasn't over yet. Gary didn't stop running. He couldn't. The adrenaline surged through his veins, pushing him forward faster than his body could keep up. His heart thudded against his ribs, each beat a reminder that he was alive, for now. Vanessa's words echoed in his mind. You'll never leave me. Not alive. He made it to the street corner before pausing to catch his breath. His legs were shaking, his vision blurry from the combination of fear, poison, and exhaustion. But he couldn't stop. Not yet. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers numb and trembling as he dialed 911. His mind was racing, his thoughts scattered. He needed help. He needed the police to get to his apartment before Vanessa did something else. Something worse. The operator's calm voice broke through the haze. 911. What is your emergency? I need help, Gary gasped. My wife. She tried to kill me. Poison. Please, you need to. Send someone to my apartment. Now, sir, stay calm. Can you provide your address? Gary gave them the address, his voice shaky, barely able to form coherent sentences. He hung up quickly, knowing that the police would take a while to get there. It felt like an eternity. He turned and began to walk, still feeling the poison coursing through his body, weakening him with each step. But something else gnawed at him. The fear in Vanessa's eyes when he confronted her. Had it been a fleeting moment of doubt? Or was she just playing him? He had to be sure. Gary turned around and headed back toward his apartment building. The pain in his body screamed at him to stop. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. Vanessa was still in there, and she wasn't going to stop until she had everything she wanted. He took the stairs, each step a challenge, each breath a struggle. By the time he reached his floor, he was dizzy, his body on the edge of collapse. But he had to keep moving. He had to finish this. When he reached his door, he hesitated, listening for any sound from inside. The silence was oppressive. He wasn't sure what he would find, but he had to face it. He reached for the doorknob, but before he could turn it, the door swung open. Vanessa stood there, her face pale, her eyes cold and calculating. She had been waiting for him. "You really thought you could just leave, Gary?" she said, her voice low, almost mocking. "You think running away is going to save you? You think the police are going to believe you over me?" Gary stood frozen, his heart pounding. He knew this was the moment. He could feel the weight of everything, his life, his marriage, the lies, hanging in the air between them. "I'm not running anymore, Vanessa," Gary said, his voice steady. "This ends now." Vanessa smirked, stepping closer to him. "Oh, it ends, all right. But not the way you think." She raised her hand, and for a moment, Gary thought she was reaching for something dangerous. His eyes scanned the room behind her. The bottle of poison was still on the counter, the evidence of her crime. But that wasn't enough. She was going to do something else. Something final. Before he could react, Vanessa pulled something out of her pocket, a knife, gleaming in the dim light. Gary's blood ran cold. He knew it was a matter of seconds now. He couldn't fight her off. Not like this, not in his condition. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and contempt as she took a step closer. "You really should have just let me have what I wanted. Gary, we could have had everything. But now I'm done playing nice." Gary's instincts kicked in. He wasn't going to die today. Not like this. With a burst of energy, he lunged at her, grabbing her wrist before she could bring the knife down. The force of his movement pushed her back, but she quickly regained her footing, using her free hand to shove him away. He staggered, but he kept his grip on her wrist, his strength fueled by desperation. Vanessa's face twisted in rage. "You think you can stop me? You think I'll just let you go?" Gary didn't answer. He was too focused on keeping her from stabbing him, too focused on not letting her win. His fingers burned from the effort, but he wasn't about to let her take his life. In a final act of desperation, he used every ounce of strength left in his body to twist her wrist, forcing her to drop the knife. It clattered to the floor, but Vanessa didn't stop. She reached for something else, something more dangerous. But this time, Gary was ready. He grabbed the bottle of poison from the counter, holding it up like a weapon. "Don't even think about it, Vanessa," he warned, his voice low and steady. Vanessa froze, her eyes flicking to the bottle and then back to Gary. She looked like she was calculating her next move. "You don't have the guts," she sneered. Gary's eyes locked onto hers. "I'm done being afraid of you. You've made this personal, Vanessa, and now it's over." For a long moment, they stood there, facing each other, the air thick with tension. Then, there was a sound, footsteps approaching from down the hall. The police. Vanessa's expression changed. She knew the game was up. She wasn't going to win this one. With a final glance at Gary, she backed away slowly. "This isn't over, Gary," she spat, before turning and fleeing out of the apartment. Gary stood there, breathing heavily, the weight of the confrontation slowly sinking in. The police arrived moments later, and everything began to blur as he was questioned, as the truth came to light. Vanessa was arrested that night. The police found everything they needed: the poison, the bank statements, the weapon. It was over. But as Gary sat in the police station, exhausted and shaken, he couldn't help but wonder, what would his life be like now? Was anything ever going to be the same? One thing was certain: he would never trust anyone the same way again.